The federal government is not going back on its decision to, start implementing the tax laws that has been passed by the National Assembly. And, well, that is the decision of the federal government, and that's the government in power. But some groups are saying, no, they consider it ill-timed. They said a lot has to be done to be able to accept some of the provisions of the tax laws. But let me bring in my guests who will be able to explain to us what the opposition is really all about. Chile Igbawa is a member of the ADC and also the spokesman of the National Opposition Movement. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Mr. Igbawa, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thanks, Geoffrey, and good evening, viewers.
I'm in copy of a document by Taiwo Yedele, who is the chairman of this committee that put this together. And it is titled 50 Tax Exemptions and Reliefs that will benefit the masses under the new tax reforms. Its very first line of statement, or the statement is that from January the 1st, 2026, the new tax laws will provide many reliefs and exemptions for low-income earners, average taxpayers, and small businesses, including payee and PIT, allowable deductions. I can go on, pensions, capital gains, and all of that. So the question will be, what is the national opposition movement kicking against?
Well, we've also read the document by Oyodele, but when we look at the law, the two do not agree. Because for the personal income tax, the exemption threshold is 800,000 naira. Now, if we multiply the basic minimum wage, that is not including other allowances, the basic minimum wage of 70,000 naira, if we multiply it by 12, it will give you 840,000 naira. So it means the lowest earner in the country will still be taxed. So when it is said that there are exemptions for low income, we don't see how that comes out in reality. Now again, for tax returns, for those who employ, you are to make tax returns in respect of employees, whatever their earnings are. And some of the earnings may be persons who may not necessarily be on the tax records, and that makes even the returns difficult for the employer. But it all shows that if the lowest earner is still going to be taxed, then we don't know what the exemptions are about. Now, it doesn't exempt, as far as we have seen from the law itself, that those who are just aching out a living are exempted from the taxes. Yes, the explanatory notes are saying something in that light, but the spirit and the letter of the law don't say so. And we believe that it is the spirit and letter of the law that is going to be implemented, and not those explanatory notes which are extra-legal that will come in force if the document is brought into force by 1st of January. So we believe that it is poverty that is being taxed, it is hunger that is being taxed, and it is just pushing people on their knees when they're already there. So we think it is very unfair. It doesn't really say that
so, Mr. Igbawa, if I may come in,
the low earners have been exempted.
My apologies if I may come in. So I remember it looks like Tao, when he talks, it feels like the more he speaks, the more it looks like people are countering or disagreeing. Now, without holding brief for him or the government, so they have said that if you look at the components of any salary, any payment, if you work anywhere and you're paid salary, there are components. There are deductibles, there are taxable, there are non-taxables. So perhaps if you look at the low-income earner, say the minimum wage, people who are earning minimum wage, depending on which state. Some state is 80-something, some state is 70-something, and all of that. So what may be taxed may not exactly be the entire 80. So if you look at the deductions across line, it may not be up to 800,000. Is that something you've investigated before you're pushing against it to conclude that minimum wage earners, as put together by him, saying outrightly they are not paying tax?
You see, the 70,000 or 80,000 you're talking about is the basic salary. It doesn't include allowances. So we're taking it from the basic, threshold, not even when allowances are added to it. When you come to allowance, you say, oh, this one is non-taxable allowance, this one is taxable. But we're saying, even when you have not brought in any allowance, to the basic salary of 70,000 per month, which sums up to 840,000. It is higher than the 800,000 threshold, which is the minimum that will not be taxed. So it doesn't include the allowances. If we could have a figure that shows that at least for the basics, somebody would not be taxed on that, you could begin to say that, well, there are considerations for low-income earners. But that basic salary of 70,000, if we multiply it by 2, it gives you 840,000 naira per annum. And then the non-taxable minimum is 800,000 naira. So it means you still have 40,000 above that 800,000 naira. So it means that the person is paying taxes. So perhaps we need maybe more explanations. The ones that's given do not agree with the spirit and letter of the law.
There's also the other part of turnover of small businesses, because I asked that question for this clarity. I'm sure he has provided some. Maybe he will answer for himself as much as possible. I just needed to bring that element for you. But we're due for a break in just a moment. Before we go for that break, company income tax, that's the CIT. For the small businesses, the argument is to the fact that it's going to be a good time for them. Before now, I think it's about 25 million. If your turnover is about 25 million, you are entitled to pay CIT, maybe collect VAT. But now that threshold has been increased to about 100 million. Is that not something to commend the government for?
Yeah, we're not saying the entire document is trash. First of all, the objective of the tax law is commendable because it brings all the multiplicity of tax laws into one document, which is good for legal practice, which is good for researchers. But we're saying that the content, the intent, when you look at those exemptions that appear to be given, and then you look at the widening net, you give exemption and then you widen the net, and then we see that the people that ought to be outside will be captured by that wider net. So except there are further explanations, maybe in greater detail, so far from what we can assess with the wider nets, we don't think that it's a good time as such. Secondly, let us also understand that the exchange rate, what was 25 million earning in the past, you compared what the earning is at this time for companies that are small and medium enterprises. You'd see that in real terms, there is no much difference between what was 50 million or 100 million in the past and then what it is today. So those things also need to be brought into consideration.
All right. We'll take a break. There's a plethora of issues I want to ask you. I may touch base with you on what the $40 billion, by my estimation of the budget presented to the president, and also what the opposition will do if they go on with this tax. But more importantly, there's a question I would like you to answer when we talk politics towards the end of the program. The APC is holding its NEC meeting as we speak. And from our correspondent, let me quote what he wrote, that the vice president has said. He said, only a fool hell-bent on suicidal path or an outright imposter can dare to challenge President Tinubu in 2027 election. But we are in a democracy and people are free to contest elections. So I'm going to ask Mr. Egbawa that they're saying, forget about 2027, maybe you prepare for 2031. Mr. Egbawa, I'm sure you heard me read that. We'll be back in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Mr. Chile Egbawa is the spokesperson of the National Opposition Movement. He joins us from Abuja City. Mr. Egbawa, apologies, we just have about 3 minutes. I'm going to throw in 2 questions and one for you to respond to them. First, what happens next if the government, which I see will go on with this tax implementation from January 2026? And then the statement by the vice president saying, look, you must be on a suicidal path or literally a fool, in his words, according to what is reported here, to try to challenge Bola Tinubu in 2027. As an opposition, how do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, on the implementation of the Tax Act, we've said that if the government refuses to listen to the voices of reason and goes on to implement it the way it is, especially when you are aware that there are serious allegations that the entire document is a fraud. So the government will be responsible for whatever implementation of a fraud will bring. but the opposition will deploy all legal, avenues available to it to ensure that the right thing is done, including going to court and all that. So we're not going to allow it to lie low. We'll take appropriate action to ensure that the proper thing is done. Now, regarding the statement by the Vice President, with due respect to his office as Vice President of the Republic, I want to say that we appear to be talking to two different, persons. We are talking to the local electorate, and we know what they are saying. We know how sufficiently angered, how sufficiently hungry, and how sufficiently desperate they are to remove this government that is ineffective, that is only punitive in whatever way it comes. But they are talking in government boardrooms, where you see flashy faces, people who are well-fed, people who have lost touch with, with reality. So they could afford to say that. But what I'm telling you is that when the time comes, they themselves will be surprised that they are dealing with a different group of people who are the minority. I heard some of the speeches talking about how many governors have moved into the APC, and governors, each of them has a vote. And if the plans are for rigging, I want to assure you that steps will be taken to ensure that we don't go backwards, but we move forward with the credibility of the electoral process. So the elections will be held. The populace will vote this government out, I can assure you of that. We are working at the grassroots levels. They are working in boardrooms of government, and there's no how you can feel if we are staying in the government house where light doesn't go off, the gen comes automatically when the light goes, public power goes off. You won't know that there are problems of electricity in this country. I think that is the environment in which they are operating from, and it's different from the environment in which the majority of Nigerians are operating from.
Mr. Bawa, it means that 2026 is going to be an interesting year, and a lot of political weight will be tested from the off-cycle down to the main election in 2027. So we're all here to make sure we bring every Nigerian up to speed. It's the decision of Nigerians to decide who leads them, and they will make that decision when the time comes. Almost thank you, Chile Igbawa, spokesperson of the National Opposition Movement. Thank you for coming on the program, sir.
Thank you, Geoffrey.